All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here as always with Drew Dinsick, recording on Monday late afternoon. Today we're going to talk about some of the injury news in the NFL. We'll break down some stock up, stock down, the Browns and the Falcons, and then talk Offensive Player of the Year, which Drew has been thrown into a little bit of chaos with some of these injuries. Let's start with those 49ers. Christian McCaffrey has an oblique and a rib, left the game in the second half against Cleveland, came back in for one play, looked okay on the play, but then seemingly must have been in a fair bit of pain, didn't return. Deebo Samuel left the game in the first half against the Browns. Looks like it's not serious, but again, not ideal. And then Trent Williams had what looked like a pretty bad ankle sprain, but he came back in too. How do these injuries, which all kind of seem like 1 to 2 week type operations, maybe they go on Monday against Minnesota, but how does this alter your outlook for Monday Night Football and for the Niners going forward?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely don't necessarily want to take on a Minnesota team not at full strength offensively. I do think that you can lean on your defense in a lot of ways in this game, but the Vikings defense is playing a heck of a lot better than they would have looked on paper, just when you kind of put together the strength of the team. A bunch of the young players have stepped up. Some of the old guys who are making a bunch of money who, may have looked a little bit over the hill have had some bounce back type performances so far this season. So this Vikings defense is not an easy test for the Niners, and Trent Williams, of the guys you mentioned, matters the most. They have enough redundancy in the wide receiver room that I think Samuel, giving him a day off would be fine. I don't think you're really jeopardizing what you're trying to do on offense without him. The Christian McCaffrey injury is probably the more impactful in terms of what do you want your offense to look like. They don't have an especially strong backfill there. I know that there was an Elijah Mitchell sighting at practice last week, so he might be the guy that actually gets a little bit more of the focus in the game planning if he's good to go this week, and they decide to give McCaffrey the week off. Long term, though, Trent Williams is your best offensive lineman by margin. He is such a supremely important piece of giving, the offensive line, kind of elevating that unit overall, giving Purdy time to operate. And I would really, really like to get some sense of how severe that injury is. When I saw it in the game, I thought it was an ACL. It looked like there was a little bit of lateral movement in his knee as he got rolled up on, but apparently it was an ankle, which is why he's in the walking boot. And I guess, I hold him in as high a regard as you can hold any active offensive lineman in the NFL. I think he is that good. I would definitely like to have a sense of whether he'll be able to go toe for toe against Danielle Hunter, who is a pretty tough matchup if you're going to roll out the backup O-line on this one.
Yeah, I think the biggest adjustment that the 49ers will have facing the Vikings instead of Cleveland is simply like Brock Purdy not playing like the worst quarterback in football, which I suspect that he's not going to against Minnesota. I think McCaffrey's interesting because so often the discourse is that, running backs are replaceable and somewhat interchangeable, and Jonathan Taylor goes out and then Zach Moss is almost leading the league in rushing yards. I do think McCaffrey, because of his pass catching ability, is, if there's one running back in the league who really alters the market, it's McCaffrey, because he has so much value as a receiver. Bill Barnwell had a good article in ESPN today where he noted that basically you just cannot play zone defense against Christian McCaffrey because of how he just sits in those zones and then what he does after the catch. So you have to play man coverage. And if you have to play man coverage against Kittle, Ayuk, Deebo, then all of a sudden the Niners have a top 2 offense in football largely because of that. And if McCaffrey's not there, then it gets a little bit more difficult. Purdy over the journey has not been as good against zone defense. He's been excellent against man. So that will be one thing to watch. And as well that the Vikings, whatever they do in other aspects of the game, that they're going to send a lot of blitzes at Purdy. So this will be interesting. This will be a good test in prime time for Brock. He's had 2 tests so far, really. Passed the first one against Dallas in flying colors, failed the second one miserably against Cleveland, and now we get part 3. But it looks like, I would guess that McCaffrey and Debo probably don't play and Williams does, would be my best guess, just given that those two left the game. Williams came back. And I wouldn't say that McCaffrey is definitely out. I'd say that Debo would probably be out. That would be my lean there. And we'll see how the market adjusts.
Yeah.
In terms of some...
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just to, I do you think the market will move on news about Samuel and McCaffrey if they sit? Because I have an appetite to bet San Francisco. There's not a lot I love on the board this week, but I think San Francisco is the bet. And I think Brock Purdy will pass the test. Just in general, playing indoors, having Ayuk available. Ayuk's matchup is incredible in this one. Kittle's matchup is incredible in this one. And I think that them being able to neutralize the blitz is likely with their heavier personnel packages. So I do have an appetite to bet the Niners. Do you think we'll get a 6.5?
I think if McCaffrey gets ruled out, then I think it might drift down to 6.5, just with how bad Purdy looked without both McCaffrey and Samuel. And against the Vikings team, which is, probably better than the team that last year, fluked its way to 13-4. But I would think that if McCaffrey and Samuel are both out, I don't think that San Francisco are going to be 7-point favorites on the road. I would probably wait until there's confirmation on McCaffrey. I suspect he's just going to be a game time decision, right? And that's how this will go. There won't be clarity.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into some of the quarterback injuries. Quickly, Trevor Lawrence looks like he may not play against the Saints on Thursday. Rolled up his knee. Doesn't seem serious, but is being called a sprain. When you sprain your knee and have a game 4 days later, generally you don't play. The market jumped from pick, Jags slide favorite, into now Saints -3. So the market seems to be trending towards CJ Beathard. What do you make of this news and how to bet that game?
I think Lawrence is going. I'm not buying the news really at all. Sure. That said, I did not out there grabbing these currently available numbers on the Jags. Right now, it looks like there was certainly some buy at 3. You've seen some of the market making shops take 3 down to -114. And I think that's realistic. I think that's reasonable. And this is now a Jags or pass for me. So I've watched the play now 3 times at the end of the game where Lawrence gets tackled. And to me, it did not look like I was actually surprised to even hear that there was something going on. Since not insider sources or anything like that, but, just the general sentiment that I'm getting from reading the beat reporters is he probably will go. I think there was a little bit more of an ominous tone to the Adam Schefter tweet, which is probably why the market reacted so aggressively here. This number to me looks like it's priced in somewhere in the 60% range that he's not going to play. And I would put it more like 60 to 70% that he goes. We have I know it's a short turnaround. I know it's a short week. Without treatment, it's tough to really make much of a confident projection here. But these elite quarterbacks, Justin Herbert last year, Josh Allen last year, like these guys, they push themselves through and, call their own numbers. It's not really about what the team, Joe Burrow to start the season. Like, it's not really about what's best for the team as much as, the guy who's throwing the ball is, making the call here. And I think Lawrence is going to likely call his own number and he's going to go out there and play. Now, this is a tough matchup. Saints much tougher defense than what they've gone up against now twice in the Colts and a couple other softer tests that they've had so far this year. So intrigued to see if the offense can get anything going. As you kind of reflect on who the Jags are so far through this season, it's pretty clearly like they have so much more talent offensively than the production and the efficiency would suggest. And their defense was going to be the big question mark and issue, but their defense has played top 5. And I don't know if that's opponent driven or if it really is something that you can look into the future and say, yeah, they're going to be this good. But if you strip out garbage time, turnovers, blah, 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 like they're up there in clearly in the second tier with the likes of the Lions and the Ravens and the Niners here after, a big old gap after the Browns. So, I think the more kind of information we can glean from the market is that the under was the right call. Whether Lawrence is a go or not, him being limited and, the quick turnaround up against a good defense and just this being more of a defensive game on both sides, I think is the current expectation. Dennis Allen, for what it's worth, not a super duper Thursday night quarterback in his handful of times going. I think he has one win in 4 chances, and that was kind of a little bit of a fluky win with the 0-10 Raiders team getting off the schneid against the Chiefs and Alex Smith a handful of years ago. So this is way back in the day. Other than that, Dennis Allen, really not a guy that I'm like really spooked that he's going to come in with some innovative game plan. So my lean would be, try to capture best possible number on the Jaguars. If you don't already have an underbet in, then you probably need to pass at this point.
Yeah, for the second year in a row, the Saints are one of the most kind of grimly uninspiring, solid, competent teams in the NFL. I think I'm probably, like, relative to just the perception of the team and the public, I'm probably higher on the Saints than anyone. I just think this is a solid team. I think that their perception is skewed because, look, they're 3-3, but the fact they lost that Green Bay game was ridiculous. They had that game won, then Carr gets hurt, Jameis comes in and is terrible, and they have to miss a field goal at the end. They really should have beaten Houston as well. They missed 2 field goals. They had bad luck on third down. So I think this team could easily be 5-1. And then the perception of them would be totally different. Carr looks fine. He threw for over 350 yards. He looks healthy. Again, the Jags have some injuries on the offensive line. It certainly feels like Jacksonville is just the better team. They have more talent, but on a short week with Lawrence either not going or banged up, I think that the Saints, if it's CJ Beathard, I'd be pretty confident the Saints are going to win that game.
Tyson Campbell also not expecting him, and he's played well. He's not as good as their other cornerback Darius Williams, but he's been playing very well. And you got enough weapons in that passing offense. The problem, I get what you're saying about the Saints. They donk so many plays with these dump offs to Kamara that are just dead and on arrival. I don't understand exactly what it is. They target him 5-6 times a game. He's got negative EPA per target so far this season. It's really, really strange.
Yeah, they just don't seem like a well-coached team. They kind of seem Charger-ish in a way. Let's jump to race through some of these other quarterback injuries. Justin Fields, right hand injury, looks like a dislocated digit, so he's probably not going to play this weekend. We'll see going forward. It's the Bagent show. Jimmy Garoppolo with a back ruled out against the Patriots, taken to a local hospital immediately for testing, and seems like he might just play against the Bears, which is a strange turn. Baker Mayfield injured his hand late against the Lions, and Ryan Tannehill was on crutches. Which one of these injuries do you think is most relevant for our purposes?
Well, these guys are all on teams that aren't going to win. I think playing through injury is not going to necessarily help any of them. I guess of them, the most relevant is going to be the Baker Mayfield hand injury, because yes, the Bucs lost. The Bucs host the Falcons. Everyone in the NFC South lost this weekend, so the Bucs didn't really lose ground. So if you're to tell me that among these teams and among these quarterbacks, there is still one team that's going to find their way into the playoff discussion, it's probably Tampa and Baker Mayfield. He was pretty horrific against the Lions, and some of that was what the Lions were doing in terms of generating pressure, and Falcons haven't been able to show consistent ability to generate pressure. So if his hand is ultimately fine, I think the Tampa's probably the right side this week against the Falcons. I will kind of say that the other injuries, Jimmy Garoppolo's made of glass. If you're hearing this for the first time, then I'm sorry that you have to learn this way, but he's not a resilient and quarterback you can count on giving you 17 starts a year. They would probably be better off going with Aiden O'Connell. I don't think they're out of any kind of wild card consideration at 3-3, but their schedule is tough enough that if they can get a couple of spot starts here by O'Connell and get wins against the likes of the Bears and the Giants, then they can keep their playoff hopes alive at least until we get to December. The injury to Justin Fields makes the future for the Bears pretty clear to me. They need to now tack into getting a top pick in the draft. My guess is he's probably going to miss several weeks. Dislocated thumb, not something that gets just a miraculous recovery. And you're not going to learn anything good about Justin Fields if you put him out there with the dislocated thumb anyway. So they might as well give it all of the time it needs to fully heal before they ultimately have to make a decision on what to do going forward franchise wise. So I would expect we don't see him again until November. And then I don't have a strong read on Ryan Tannehill, but the fact that they're saying it is like last year's injury and that cost him four weeks in total. I think he was just unable to go. I think it's fair to put Malik Willis in at least in heavy pencil, if not pen, for after they come out of their bye playing the Falcons week 8.
Just on the Raiders, they're somehow 3-3. Feels like they're 1-5. They're 3-3, and randomly in 4 weeks they play the Jets on Sunday Night Football, and there's a very good chance when you look at their schedules going into that game that it could be the 5-4 Raiders against the 5-3 New York Jets in a really pertinent game for most likely wild card positioning in the AFC. I don't know how that's even possible. It feels like these teams are both, they were circling the drain very recently, but the Raiders keep on eking out. Well, they've eked out 2 results in a row, and they eked out the week 1 win at Denver. And now all of a sudden, I mean, they have weapons on offense, and Jimmy is a fine quarterback when he's, not fulfilling his destiny as Mr. Glass. And Max Crosby's amazing on defense, and the defense has held up enough. They're a weird team. It feels like McDaniel should just be fired by now. Winning, so they're strange, but that's one.
Yeah.
So
their whole schedule is soft. Their whole schedule is soft enough. They're not going to be eliminated until December or January. They're going to be kind of right on the fringes, even though this is a team that I don't think I think you have to neutrally power rate them well under an average team. Even with Jimmy Garoppolo out there. So it's pretty wild. You're absolutely right. They could be 5-4. They could be 6-4 coming out of that Jets game. It's at home. Jets aren't going to score you. You have to run you off the field scoring points.
The Steelers and Raiders are combined 6-5, which you would not have known had you watched that Sunday night game between those two teams a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, or any other game from either of those teams.
Great point. Well, this Sunday night, Drew, there's a better game. 2 of the NFL's most explosive offenses meet in Philadelphia, where I will be when the high-flying Dolphins take on the Eagles. Get ready for what could be a shootout. May well be a shootout at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. All right, let's do some stock up, stock down. Let's start stock up with a team that I have lined myself with for much of the season, for better or worse, the Cleveland Browns, who take care of business against the 49ers in a very peculiar, strange game. They really got lucky with the refs down the stretch, but also, if you're on balance of play, as we talked about yesterday, I don't think you can say that the Niners really deserve to win that game, given how dominant Cleveland were on defense, and also the fact that they eked out 19 points against that Niners defense with some bombs to Amari Cooper and some well-timed big runs from Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford. And now all of a sudden, this Cleveland team is 3-2, and their schedule the rest of the way is incredibly soft. Their most difficult games are going to be at Baltimore and at Cincy, but there is a lot of cake on this. They have games home to Arizona, home to Pittsburgh, at Denver, home to Chicago, at Houston, home Jets. There are a lot of wins on this schedule if Deshaun Watson is right. So what do you think about plus 240 to win the division, Drew?
I mean, it's right there for the taking. The idea that they are the beneficiaries of a last place schedule, I think, is really where you got to start. And actually, the fact that through this point in the season, according to market ratings, they've played the 4th toughest schedule. That surprised me.
The Niners do a lot there.
The Niners do a lot. Yeah, the
Anymore.
The Niners are doing some heavy lifting there. You're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean they have exactly what you would hope to have in terms of a start, and the two losses in division are maybe the kind of the one pump the brakes a little bit here, just because those have impact from a tie-breaking standpoint as we get later into the season. But there's no denying that the Cleveland Browns are playing the best defense of any team in football, and it's not particularly close. I think we talked preseason, this could be a top 10 unit. After a couple weeks, it's like, oh, this is definitely a top 5 unit. And now they're number 1 with a bullet. And I think that as long as they stay healthy, there's no reason to expect that this defense is going to regress in any way, shape, or form. They have wave after wave of pass rush they can bring on, and Jim Schwartz is doing a masterful job of coming up with team-specific game plans to deploy his guys in ways that you're seeing contributions from players that I really did not expect in the secondary at the linebacking level. And when the team's playing with that much confidence, and that they're the defense coordinator is pushing all the right buttons, then it's pretty exciting to see how that carries on. They also, it's worth noting, as good as their EPA per play and defense has been this season, they have not been the beneficiaries of a lot of turnovers.
Yes.
Even in the game against the Niners, where they get one fumble and one pick. It felt like there was more opportunities there to turn the Niners over in that wet weather, and they only got the 2. So if the ball starts bouncing their way a little bit, if Brock Purdy, if the quarterback fumbles directly into Myles Garrett's lap, you would expect maybe he recovers a ball or two going forward here. So, I guess where I'm getting at is that it's not obvious to me that you're going to see immediate regression with the way that the defensive stats are compiling here for the Brownies. And I think you have to rate them accordingly. They have, even beyond just the fact that they're not playing very many good teams, they're not playing very many good quarterbacks, Jay. Like, the list of quarterbacks that they're going to face between here and the end of the season is pretty darn weak. The lone exception is who knows what Joe Burrow is going to look like week 18, but Browns could have the division set up by then if their defense keeps playing this well. So right now I project the Browns to win just under 11 games going forward here, considering the schedule. And I think I am at bit over I'm at a bit over 40% for them to win the AFC North right now, which is surprising, but that's almost entirely based on schedule.
Yeah, that's a pretty big edge relative to plus 240. I think there might be some plus 290 about still on the Browns. I think that, look, it's an outlier good defense. These defenses don't come around every few years. And the fact that, they're just completely embarrassing teams. I think back to what they did against Pittsburgh, which they gave up 26 points in that game somehow because of 2 defensive touchdowns. But just watching Najee Harris run into that line over and over again. And it was a similar deal yesterday where the Niners, I think before the last drive or two, I'm not sure Brock Purdy completed a pass in the second half. He might have completed one to George Kittle for like half a yard. It was just completely insane. And I think on offense, it's so long ago that it's gotten washed away a bit. But the last time we saw Deshaun Watson, he played his best ever game by far as a Cleveland Brown. Completely lit up Tennessee. He looked like the guy he was in Houston. I understand the Tennessee defense, or at least their secondary, isn't great, but it's not like Lamar Jackson completely lit up Tennessee. Joe Burrow, albeit limited, couldn't do anything against the Titans. So I think they have a fair bit of upside on defense, on offense, and then the defense, it is what it is. I think they're going to absolutely destroy Gardner Minshew on Sunday. And I think if Deshaun plays, so that line closes a field goal or bigger. And I think that the Browns will cover that. Let's jump to a less inspiring division, which is the NFC South, and the Atlanta Falcons are stock down because of Desmond Ridder, effectively, who, much like Zach Wilson, had a bit of a come down from his Sunday Night Football exploits against the Chiefs, where he outplayed Mahomes, then kind of goes back to being Zach Wilson against the Broncos and the Eagles. Desmond Ridder, a week ago, had the best performance he's ever had by margin against the Texans, who have a reasonable defense. And then he was horrific against Washington and effectively cost them the game. He was more high variance than he typically is, Ritter. Usually it's just low variance, just consistently bad. But he did provide Drake London with a pretty good stat line. But the turnovers were costly. And now this Falcons team, despite having an insanely easy schedule the rest of the way, looks like it might be turning to Taylor Heineke at some point. You know you're in a bad spot when you're 2.5-point dogs at a Tampa Bay team that may be starting Kyle Trask this coming week. What's your read on the Falcons?
So I'm just under 30% that they still pull out this miserable division. This is the deciding week, though, right? If you lose this game to the Bucs, I think your ceiling is 8 wins this season, and then you need a lot of other things to go right for you to still get this division home. If you beat the Bucs here, then you might actually be in control, depending on what happens, of course, on Thursday Night Football. I think this 3-way race is probably going to be a 2-way race between Tampa and New Orleans after this week, and market's kind of telling you that as well. I gotta stock down the Falcons for a different reason than Ritter, though, and it was Art Smith's handling of the end of game. He correctly went for 2. When you're down 14 and you score a touchdown, you're supposed to go for 2 mathematically. That is the correct call. And then they got a penalty, which put them on the doorstep. And when you are this magical dynamic running team with this unique running scheme that no one can seem to defend, how you can't get a 1-yard 2-point conversion home is very, very confusing to me. But that said, the real end of game stuff and some of the plays they drew up were pretty uninspiring, and then to kind of really kind of hurt yourself by taking a timeout after you've already clocked the ball was pretty inexcusable. So not sure exactly what was going on with Art Smith there, but you can't have both a quarterback who has limitations that are obvious and easy to defend and a coach who is giving away win probability on the field. So, I think the Falcons, this is sort of the final call for them to put themselves in the discussion for a playoff spot this season. And even as soft as their schedule is, again, like if they don't get this win, if they are 3-4 coming out of these first 7 weeks, I think your ceiling is going to be an 8-win team.
Yeah, the sneaky thing with the Falcons is that they ran the ball extremely well last season, despite having Marcus Mariota as their quarterback, who is no threat whatsoever of airing it out and creating any kind of spacing for the run game. This year, they've been terrible running the ball, despite bringing in Bijan Robinson. They got a success rate on the ground of 34.3%, which is the 3rd worst in the league, better than only Pittsburgh and Vegas, who have had significant issues naturally with that severe negative EPA per play rushing the ball. I don't know if it's a Bijan's not been as good as advertised. He's not grading particularly well by PFF after a really hot start. But that offense just seems broken, and the defense it's not terrible, but it's not going to lift them to victory. So I agree. This is the season. Really high stakes here, Drew. Either they win this game and they can win the division at 8-9, or they lose the game and then their season's over. So really looking forward to this one in Tampa.
Must see TV, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why watch Eagles Dolphins when you can tune into Ritter at potentially Trask?
I guess here's one thing about that matchup that I just want to get your take on. The Falcons' run defense is elite. Sure. And the Buccaneers' run offense is putrid. Is that being too kind? It is going to be one-dimensional football. It is going to be entirely on the arm of Baker Mayfield, and it is going to be entirely trying to pick on some of the softer parts of the secondary and not make the key turnover here. So as grim as I maybe am feeling about any type of bullishness on the Falcons for this season at this moment, they're still alive in this game.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everyone's alive. In every NFC South game. There's no one dead, ever. I think Baker's he was terrible against Detroit, but I think he'd shown enough the first month of the season that he's not that bad. He's a tier above Ritter, I think. So if he's good to go, I think they'll have the advantage. He also suffered for some drops. Mike Evans dropped a terrible ball that he really should have brought in. But anyway, we will see. I'll try not to watch too much of that one. All right, basketball season is almost here, and that means one thing, Drew. It's draft season. Get the Roto World Basketball Draft Guide, which includes all the rankings, player outlooks, and projections you need to win your league this year. Go to NBCSports.com to get your draft guide now and use code preseason25 to save 25% and receive a $10 Fanatics e-gift card. All right, Offensive Player of the Year, always one of the more intriguing markets because perhaps doesn't get as much attention as some of the more marquee awards. Tyreek Hill is a plus 145 favorite at the moment. Christian McCaffrey, after the injury, is plus 225 and has drifted. And then you've got Chase and Diggs at 18-1, a slew of quarterbacks, which, I mean, we can talk about this. I just don't think this is a quarterback award anymore. And I think, multiple voters have come out and said, we treat this now as the best non-quarterback award, which it has been awarded as such the past 4 or 5 years, I believe. With McCaffrey hurt and a bit more upheaval in this market, with Jefferson done as well, any bets here for you?
I mean, we're talking about rarefied air for what Tyreek Hill has done so far this season.
Yes.
And he's doing it at a rate that is so good that he probably is going to set records even if he does regress in the second half of the season. Typically you expect regression, not just because the weather gets colder, because there's more tape. Like, there's a lot of factors that go into just passing offenses get less dynamic and less outstanding as you go from week 1 to week 17. It's pretty typical. And I would also kind of point out that Miami is, they've been a little bit, we're talking about them on the heels of just, slaughtering the Giants and the Panthers. They should have done that. Like, that was expected. These were, it's 14-point favorites in back-to-back weeks. And so we are in the afterglow of 2 very, very solid performances against teams that they very well should have showed well against, and they did. The later portion of their schedule includes some much tougher tests. We start at Philly this week, but they have games at Kansas City. They have games at the Jets, which is going to be tough for their offense, in my opinion. And then Cowboys, Ravens, Bills are their final 3 games, which could cut both ways. Like, those are gonna be competitive games. They're gonna have to throw, and they're gonna have to rely on Tyreek Hill if they're gonna be competing in those games. In fact, you saw it yesterday. The best thing that could have happened to Tyreek Hill's stat line was a 14-point deficit for the Dolphins. Like, if they were on cruise control and it just turns into the let's give RB3 some kicks here, then he's not going to compile as many stats. But because they were down 2 touchdowns, it was just, okay, let's air it all out, and that really helped him, I think. And so it's crazy to say it, but Tyreek probably goes as the Dolphins defense goes. And if they don't get better and this team has to score 40 in a given week to compete, then he's going to continue getting absurd target share. And at least to this point in the season, like, health and availability hasn't been an issue. I think you could say Tyreek Hill's probably a little bit of a safer bet in terms of OPOY than Tua is an MVP, because Hill can continue to work with a guy like Mike White. Whereas, Tua misses a couple of games, he's basically out of the race. So the injury fragility for Miami, and why I'm not really invested in any of their futures markets, is largely surrounding Tua. And I would have relatively high confidence that you're going to get at least 16, if not 17 games out of Tyreek this year. So I think it's fine that he's the favorite that he is. But in my gut, I think that a player that starts as hot as he does has a tendency to lose a little bit of luster as we come down the home stretch if he's not continuing to compile these type of games. Now, he could clear that bar by setting records, in which case it's over. But I think at currently where we sit, I'm going to wait until after he torches the Eagles, and then I'm going to buy up some OPOI outside of Tyreek Hill, I think.
Yeah, I think with Tyreek, I think this is now becoming a bet on health that McCaffrey, if McCaffrey misses time, which it looks like he probably will, I think with Tyreek, like, he's had 157 plus yards and a touchdown in 4 of his 6 games so far. Like, it's completely absurd. And if you told me that Tyreek Hill will play at least 9 of the next 11 games, then I would make him red odds. I'd make him better than evens if that is the condition. And he's a heavy favorite to play at least 9 of the next 11 games. Like, that is how good he's been so far, that he can miss a couple of games and still, I think, be the clear favorite to win this award. The only thing is health. And there's a couple of weird things at play there. One is that, so in terms of like how sustainable this is, he's probably not going to keep doing what he's doing so far. But last year he had 6 games of his first 12. He had 140 plus yards, which is completely insane. But he's made it so that this seems like relatively sustainable, what he's doing. The sneaky thing with him, and I think with this market, and I'm not sure what this really intimates around his health or just the plan for using him, but he's not playing nearly as many snaps as he did last season. He only played 25 snaps against the Giants a week ago. And so he's been sitting in like the 65, 70% snaps. And wide receivers don't play every single snap, but like Jamar Chase plays 95% of the snaps, basically, barely ever comes off the field. So I don't know if Tyreek is nursing something, or they've just decided, like, you broke down at the end of last season, you are not playing as much as you did. I would guess that's it, given that when he is on the field, he's still the fastest player in the league, so he probably can't be hurt. So I think that cuts both ways, reduces his ceiling a little bit in terms of, he's not getting as many targets as he did last year because he's not out on the field running as many routes. At the same time, this increases the likelihood, I guess, that he's going to make it through the whole season. And the other thing with Tyreek is that I don't think like winning the division or getting the 1 seed really matters that much for Offensive Player of the Year. Like, the Vikings didn't end last year with very good vibes. They kind of melted a little bit down the stretch and they fell into the 3 seed and whatever. Like, Jefferson had the best case and he won. I think if Tyreek, as long as they're a playoff team, which they're an overwhelming favorite to be, I think that will satisfy the team component of this award. So I think Tyreek should be more like, I don't think it's a massive bet at plus 145, but I think that he should be closer to plus 110. And again, we spoke about this last week, I believe, but if I was going to take one long shot bet in the market, at least outside of the top 2, it'd still be Chase at 18-1, just because of the ceiling.
We agree. So all this, in light of all this, in order to break the all-time receiving record, Tyreek Hill needs to average 105 yards per game for the remaining 11 games. That's higher than his previous career high, which was last year, where he went 100 yards per game. 100.6. Before that, his previous yards per game high was 92 in the record-breaking season with the Kansas City Chiefs in 2018. So it is not obvious that he's definitely going to ultimately set these records, which I think is why, in the back of my head, the fact that he's compiling all this early, the fact that people, may forget about it once we get time to the, the voting, and that he, that it's not a guarantee that he's going to set the all-time mark, are all considerations where I want to be against him. But considering he's going up against the Eagles this week with a limited, if not completely devoid of star talent secondary in Philly, is concerning, because this is a pretty decent spot to sort of truly solidify his status in that market. So I think I agree with you on Chase being the bet outside of Hill. And I think this is going to be a 2-man race pretty soon here. And it's just a matter of can Hill hold him off, or can Chase run him down?
Yeah. And Stephon Diggs has gotten a bit of love in this market. I think Diggs can win, but he's not a bet for me at current prices. He just doesn't have the ceiling of Chase or of Tyreek. He's just not as good as Tyreek. And the thing with Diggs as well is that he averages 12.7 yards per catch, whereas Tyreek averages 19.4 and was 14.4 last year. Diggs just doesn't have the 180-yard games that Tyreek seems to have every second week at this point. It's intermediate stuff. again, we spoke about this last week. He's just not as fast as Tyreek and Chase. And he just doesn't have the massive games. And the other problem with Diggs, the biggest problem is that he plays in Buffalo in the second half of the season and Tyreek Hill plays in Miami. So one of them's going to have to deal with weather, which is just going to knock out like 2 games where your ceiling becomes getting 75 receiving yards. And the other one is not going to have to deal with that, which I think is pretty relevant. Okay, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Please rate and subscribe if you're listening to us as podcast, and a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you tomorrow.